Hello, everybody. It is Friday afternoon time for C2-A-Days, the August 4th PM edition. We'll be going through quite a few news and notes from college football fall camps across the country, TCU, Oregon, Oregon State, Wisconsin, and much more. Starting with TCU, Stephen Johnson of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram has mentioned that so far, Chandler Morris has looked very sharp in spring practices, specifically a 7-on-7 portion that was open to the media. Recently, on Tuesday, connected with Ole Miss transfer receiver Jalen Robinson for a 40-yard touchdown during that period. The following day, on Wednesday, there was a deep strike to freshman Cordell Russell for a touchdown as well. And this was part of an interview with Chandler Morris, who spoke a little bit about the new offense under Kendall Briles, the comfortable, the level of comfortability that he has with throwing the deep ball, which is something that we are likely to see a little bit more this year. And that seems to be translating into some big plays early on in fall camp. At Oregon State, Brendan Slaughter and TJ Mathewson of BeaversEdge.com mentioned that on Thursday, Jonathan Smith, head coach, emphasized how much work DJ Uiagalelei had put in with the receivers during the offseason, the chemistry that he and that group were able to build during the summer apparently has paid off really well during the opening days of spring practice. This report says that Uiagalelei looked significantly more comfortable in the pocket, anticipating where his receivers would be in their routes. There was an interesting note in the piece, that day one recap from Thursday, that guys who would be put on the best shape of their life list include some favorite names from campus to Canton, for sure. Aiden Childs, Isaiah Newell, Jack Velling, Damian Martinez, Riley Sharp, who it's worth noting has moved from defense to tight end, Sion Loloe, Jake Overman, and Joshua Gray. In the in-state rivalry at Oregon, there were quotes from new offensive coordinator Will Stein via Zachary Neal of Ducks Wire. He said Stein, quoted as saying, "Every great team I've been on has used multiple backs," talking about the potential for a running back rotation or potentially committee in Eugene this year. He goes on to say, "I think you can play 3 or 4 a game. I think that that's really good. Obviously, there's going to be kind of your 1A, 1B, maybe your second, third back that are going to rotate in. But, you like to keep those guys healthy. It's a really violent position, and they all have great skill sets. So we're going to be able to utilize them all." So Bucky Irving last year had sort of emerged as the top ball carrier there at Oregon, but Noah Whittington and some other folks were certainly in the mix as well. And it does sound like, at least at this point in the early days of fall camp, that Will Stein is expecting to, not make it a one-man show at the running back position there at Oregon. At Colorado, Brian Howell of Buff Zone mentioned that in the title of a recent piece, "Strong Start to Camp for Receiver Xavier Weaver." Quoted offensive coordinator Sean Lewis, "He's a guy that has flashed early and has flashed often." We mentioned earlier this week that Jimmy Horn Jr. was back and healthy at the start of fall camp. He apparently is also impressing, but a name that has been mentioned multiple times that I've seen as another incoming transfer, senior Javon Antonio. Lewis was quoted as saying he's a big body kid that can run. He's got a ton of college experience, so there's not a whole lot that phases him. And Antonio was a 6'4", 225-pound transfer from Northwestern State at the FCS level. So has played a lot of football and seems like he's going to be potentially a factor in that Colorado receiving room, another weapon for Shedeur Sanders there in Boulder. There was a nice piece on Hog Sports the 247 Arkansas site by Curtis Wilkerson that gave a really in-depth rundown of receivers that are in the mix as Arkansas kicked off their 2023 fall camp this week. KJ Jefferson was complimentary of the wide receiver group after the first day of practice, but head coach Sam Pittman offered an interesting quote, specifically struck out to me about Tyron Broden, who I had assumed a lot of the offseason would be the primary or at least the favorite to be the top wideout in the system. But Pittman said, Broden was the one who doesn't understand our system, doesn't understand the offensive system that I felt like got hurt in spring because of that. As far as I know, without watching the tape, he made some good catches today and did some good things. So, Broden has been able, it sounds like, to impress with his skill set, certainly his size. He's listed at 6'7". There apparently was a particularly very impressive catch that he made, but it did strike me that right now, Broden is not apparently among the first team wide receiver group in practices, and part of that might just be not quite understanding the playbook just yet. There was a true freshman who impressed Sean Pittman and KJ Jefferson, according to reports. Davian Dozier, the piece by Wilkerson mentioned, looks the part of an SEC receiver at 6'4", 205. Was the recipient of a deep ball from Jefferson, as well as the winner of a 50-50 ball with a nice grab later in drills. So, there's plenty of potential literally big play receivers, it sounds like, for Arkansas. But a little bit, one other receiver that caught Sam Pittman's eye was Isaac Satanga. Said that he did some good things today. Part of it was blocking and his ability to get in there and mix it up. So a little, not the flashy big plays, although it does sound like Satanga had a solid all-around practice, but does the blocking as well, and that may be part of the reason why Satanga is in with that first group, which consisted, according to Hog Sports, of KJ Jefferson, of course, at quarterback, Raheem Sanders at running back. The wide receiver group was Samuel Mbeke, Isaac Tesla, who is a Division II transfer, another big target wide receiver, and Satanga. The tight end was Nathan Bax, and I did see a note about some more depth at the tight end position that Luke Hess is apparently continuing to impress. Made a few nice grabs, according to this report, including one where he sort of tiptoed down the sideline. They did mention that the incoming transfer from North Texas, Gums, is still in the mix and certainly not to be counted out. But Varkey's Gums is potentially starting at a little bit behind at least a couple of tight ends right now, Nathan Bax and Luke Hass. At LSU, quick note, like earlier this week, that Aaron Anderson is in the mix to potentially earn reps at the slot receiver position. He's competing with Kyron Lacey for that spot. On Friday, Wisconsin offered a lot of access, where Jesse Temple of The Athletic, who we've mentioned, I think, just about every report we've done so far this fall, but had a very lengthy write-up Friday afternoon that provided a lot of interesting nuggets about the offense. Bryson Green apparently was the wide receiver standout early in camp on the first day, showed great physicality and play strength, according to Temple. And he showcased that again on Friday, coming up with a play, what they called the play of the preseason camp thus far. So 3 or 4 practices in, but Bryson Green is impressing. And it sounds like it's sort of, 1 or 2 different receivers every day are kind of stealing the show a little bit. There was specific mention of another who flashed on Friday, Quincy Burrows. And it's not so much a name to note perhaps for, immediate playing time, make a big impact this year. However, some detail on it. Burrows, it sounds like, had moved up from the third team offense a little bit, was playing more with the second team and impressed. But that was in part because Keontez Lewis was withheld from live drills after sustaining an apparent injury on Thursday, according to Temple. So there wasn't any other detail that I saw about that potential injury, but just something to note because Keontez Lewis was one of those players who had shown some flashes at parts early in fall camp. The backup quarterback position sounds like Tanner Mordecai, didn't necessarily have the best day, likely starter, but Braden Locke, who some see as a potential challenger, could maybe eventually wrestle that job away from Mordecai if he doesn't start out the season hot. But apparently Locke really struggled on Friday. Through 3 interceptions in the practice. At one point was pulled from a drill for Miles Burkett, who has been the third string quarterback. And then Matt's not here, but I know he would like a note, mentioned he'd like a note on Nick Evers. It sounds like Evers has been the fourth stringer, earned work with the reserves on one side of the field, while the first and second team offenses worked on 11-on-11 drills elsewhere. However, Evers, who Jesse Temple again notes, has arm strength as good as any quarterback on the roster, did deliver a touchdown of more than 30 yards in the back of the end zone to a walk-on receiver named Grady O'Neill. So that at least is a positive report, even if Evers is currently with the fourth team offense. Trying not to lose my voice or get as winded in the afternoon show like I did this morning. At Iowa State, head coach Matt Campbell said Friday that running back Jarrell Brock has yet to practice this fall for the Cyclones. Campbell did not give any additional reasoning as to why, according to Travis Hines of the Des Moines Register. Brock, we haven't mentioned him specifically yet on C2-A-Days, but he has been rumored to be involved in the gambling scandal that is impacting Iowa and Iowa State, and Hunter Deckers being the biggest name thus far. But sounds like Brock is potentially connected, or at least so far has yet to take the field this fall. At Arizona State, Chris Karpman of Sun Devil Source reported that Isaiah Johnson, who is the highest rated member of ASU's 2021 recruiting class, was dismissed on Thursday. At South Carolina, head coach Shane Beamer relayed that Dakarian Joyner is expected to be, quote, a huge part of the backfield this season following a move from receiver. That's a note according to John Whittle of 247 Sports. A quick follow-up on what we mentioned yesterday, this time last night, about Florida. Freshman receiver Eugene Wilson III and sophomore receiver Ty Chicola Bowman are back in practice. At Boston College, got this information from their official team website, which isn't always the best source for news or useful nuggets, but they did have a pretty detailed list of highlights from Boston College's early practice, where I'm going to read from the story. 2 early connections from quarterback Emmett Moorhead to Jaden Williams for first downs led the offense down the field. Transfer quarterback Thomas Castellanos and the twos utilized Xavier Coleman in the pass game out of the slot. Castellanos did play some with the number 1 offense. He found Williams immediately across the middle. And then in a second team period later in the practice, Castellanos threw over the top to Dino Tomlin for a long touchdown pass. And then the following series, Moorhead went deep to freshman Jaden Skeet down the right sideline for a one-handed catch. They also mentioned that Skeet was involved early in the offense and had multiple receptions in a 7-on-7 drill. So that's potentially a name to file away for the future. True freshman, sounds like, is getting an early opportunity potentially for some playing time. At Old Dominion, there was a nice write-up again from the official team website that listed a large number of incoming transfers. I specifically spent some time this morning going through our team profiles and adding about half a dozen defensive backs and at least one offensive lineman who have joined the team recently. But the name of note, perhaps, is a kind of an under the radar story. I know he's gotten some mention before, but Kadarius Callaway, who signed out of junior college, originally signed with Alabama as a defensive back, but was a really, really highly rated recruit coming out of high school. He has since converted to running back and is going to be in the mix, is going to compete for carries and playing time. But one note from Ricky Ronnie in the piece that Old Dominion is likely to run the football, and it put in quotes, by committee, meaning he will use a large number of backs, and said that Callaway is expected to be a member of that committee. So good news. Callaway, very talented player, is in line for carries and touches, but perhaps won't get a very heavy workload, at least early on, as that shakes out. At FAU, Casey Thompson and Daniel Richardson are competing for the starting quarterback job. Cameron Priester of the University Press quoted new head coach Tom Herman on the timeline for making a decision between the two. So like a lot of places across the country, FAU, not really a real indication of who is ahead. We expect Casey Thompson is the favorite for this job, but Herman said, quote, "I think about 10 days out is the right number from game one. If it unfolds sooner than that, great. But I think that you're going into the game with who should get a majority of reps at least a week, if not a couple of days beyond that. So I think somewhere around 10 days out from game one would be logical. So if you are looking for confirmation that this is Casey Thompson's job, we're probably not going to get that news until the last week of August. At Buffalo, Rachel Lindsay of the Buffalo News noted that Ron Cook Jr., who is a senior running back, fifth year, had his first live reps since sustaining a neck injury in the game against Central Michigan that cost him the final 3 games of 2022, as well as spring practice. Buffalo is also installing a new offensive coordinator DJ Mangus is now in charge, and the offense, the system has been called, quote, very multiple. So quarterback Cole Snyder was quoted in this piece as saying, a lot of it's new, but at the end of the day, everybody runs the same plays. So basically, it's about how we do things. So not a ton of detail, but Buffalo going out, hiring DJ Mangus, who was connected to that LSU 2019 staff, among others. So if you're trying to figure out, if Buffalo might get back to running the football at a level that was, so valuable from a fantasy perspective in the Lance Leopold era, doesn't really look like that's necessarily going to be the case. But because it's, a multiple system and similar to what a lot of folks out there are running, it's not necessarily sounding like it's going to be super pass heavy either. So not a whole lot of detail there, but the note about Cook and being back and fully healthy is good to know for him, and expect him to be in the mix in what probably is going to be another committee situation. At Georgia Southern, and this is another note from the team site. Sounds like Derwin Burgess Jr. is just very impressive early in fall camp. Not to anyone's surprise necessarily, but there was mention specifically of another SportsCenter top 10 play. However, a couple of others were featured in a quick write-up of some of the highlights, including a freshman wide receiver that you may want to jot down the name of, DeAndre Buchanan, if you hadn't already. O.J. Arnold at running back has also been a standout performer, perhaps the favorite to be the number 2 running back in that system. And because Georgia Southern has turned into such a prolific passing offense, it's important to know, who else might be working in behind guys like Derwin Burgess and Hood there at the top of the depth chart. One name to remember, perhaps you forgot about, former quarterback Sam Kinnerson, who converted to wide receiver, has suffered an injury last year, early in the year against Nebraska. Sounds like he is continuing to make progress. It was a knee injury in the Nebraska game that cost him the rest of the year. He is running routes with the receivers, hasn't quite been released into full, live action. But Kinnerson, to me, back when Georgia Southern was running the option, seemed like he was athletic enough to be able to make the conversion to wide receiver and potentially make an impact. So curious to see if that, if he's able to get back fully healthy and if that will come to fruition. Just a few more notes. Following up this morning, we talked a little Fresno State, but failed to mention Jackson Moore of Barkboard's projected depth chart. He's not ready to make a call yet at quarterback. Did list Logan Fife or Mikey Keene on today's write-up at quarterback. So most probably expect Keene to win that job, but the fact that Fife, who is returning, has been at Fresno State, listed at least, first, whether that's alphabetically or not, who knows. But there is a designation at running back. Malik Sherrod is listed at number 1, separated between he and Elijah Gilliam or Damian Moore at the running back spot. The starting wide receivers projected are Mac DeLina, Josiah Freeman, and Eric Brooks. The players behind them right now are Tim Greer or Mikel Barkley, transfer who's most recently been at Toledo, prior TCU, Jalen Moss, and then Jordan Brown or Jalen Gill. Jalen Gill, I did read up a little bit, has just arrived after transferring from Boston College, the former high 4, close to 5-star recruit at Ohio State. Sounds like he, though, is starting out with the second group is I think, in my opinion, going to push for one of those starting jobs. Whew. Matt, we need to get you back, buddy, so I can take a breath. East Carolina, Stephen Igo of Hoist the Colors, who does a great job, obviously, covering ECU, has mentioned, not surprisingly, that Josiah Hatford is looking like the potential top option in the passing game, but that there's a good 3-man competition going on at the X receiver between Jarrett Garner, Chase Sowell, and Keelan Robinson. He notes that Ryan King has been recovering from an offseason shoulder injury that seems to be limiting him a little bit in that competition. I have tried to find some notes on the running back position at East Carolina with really not a whole lot of detailed success. I know there are some Marlon Gunn fans out there, including some of the folks at C2C and the CFF team specifically. There was a story that highlighted Rajay Harris, who is the most experienced player there. When he was a true freshman, got some starting opportunities and actually got some all-conference recognition early on. He, of course, has missed a large chunk of last season due to injury. He's back practicing, sounds like, according to the coaching staff in Ego's reporting, that they are going to be somewhat cautious, but not really hold him back, and trying to read between the lines. And I know there are folks out there who don't believe this to be the case, but I would wager that Harris right now has a slight edge over Gunn in that job. But to be quite honest, the level of production that East Carolina lost, it may not matter if you're thinking about it from a fantasy perspective. My expectations are quite modest for ECU this year. Middle Tennessee, there was a note from Sam Dutton of the MTSU Athletic Communications, so the official site there as well. Not a whole lot of news, but there was a specific mention of a true freshman running back who has impressed both the quarterback and the likely starting, or excuse me, both the coaching staff and the likely starting quarterback, Nicholas Vatato, is Jakail Middlebrook, true freshman running back from Fayetteville, Georgia. Quoted here of Dutton saying that he had a strong enough spring that he was getting reps in the 11-on-11 portion of practice, a rarity for a true freshman, mainly with the second unit. But Frank Peasant is somebody who seems to be in line for a pretty heavy workload. Middle Tennessee brought in Jaden Creedle as a transfer. They also have Avarius Sparrow and JUCO transfer Ramal Webb. So Jakail Middlebrook making strides in the depth chart already with what appears to be a pretty competitive, relatively deep running back group. Just something to note. And then finally, if you're looking for adjustments to home field advantage, things like that, in your projections, like I do, take note that the UMass UConn game was originally expected to be a neutral site game. They were still looking for a venue, with both Fenway Park and Gillette Stadium rumored to be potential hosts. Turns out they announced today that game is going to be hosted by UMass. So that game will be in Amherst, not in Boston. So not a neutral site. Give the Minutemen the 2 or 2.5 points, however you decide to do it. So that will wrap it up for the Friday PM edition of C2-A-Days, and that'll be it for us this week. We are going to take the weekend off, but we'll be accumulating news reports. There's certainly, as the fall camp rolls on, will be some scrimmages on Saturdays and things like that. So we will try our very best to collect as much news, notes, and information as we can over the weekend. And I will be back with you Monday morning for the AM edition. So hope everyone has a wonderful week. Do reach out if there's any item in particular that you'd like to know a little more about, or a particular question you'd like me to try to dig into. Certainly want to make these as useful as possible. So do subscribe, campus2canton.com. Check out the C2C Winning Edge tier for our FBS team profiles, our returning production database, our player and team stat projections, which working on slowly but surely, trying to get those out as quickly as possible. Do expect that we'll have something to share with you on that probably middle to late next week. But stay patient with us. We appreciate it. Thank you for your support, and have a great weekend.